All right. So the date data types. This is a very, very important data type. I would always feel because um, this is the most complex data type in the RDBMS, if you see. Because if you look at the date and the time, so we have something called year, month, and the day, where we call that as a date. So we have date and time, right? So when you say a date, what does the date consist of? Date is formed I mean, if you look at your date, it has three important components, right? So one is the year, the other is the month, and the other is the day. Okay. Then you also have time. So what are the components of your time? So what forms the time? So what components forms the time? So the hour, minutes, and the second. Correct? So taking these six different components into consideration, we have four different types of data types. Okay? One of it is the date. Okay? At any point in time, the value that you are trying to insert into this should always be the date. That means it should always contain only the three components, that is year, month, and the day. And it also has a format, correct? Am I right or wrong? If you look at the date, that has a format. The standard format is always YYY hyphen MMM hyphen DD. This is an American standard format we usually follow. Um, okay, so the example, if you look at this format, it looks something like this. It's 2024 hyphen 0 hyphen 19. And this is going to take 3 bytes. That means if any value that you're trying to insert into a date column, that value will take 3 bytes in the memory. And when you take the time is made of three things: the hour, minutes, and the seconds. So the format looks something like this, which is a standard format, which is HH, capital HH, colon capital MM, colon S, capital SS. And the example for that is 10 colon 30 colon 00. And this is basically the 24 hours format. That means anything that you try to represent in this has to be in 24 hours format. That means your hours are in 24 hours format. Okay, and this is also going to take 3 bytes. And we also have something called date time. That means it's a combination of your both date and as well as the time. Okay, that means whenever you're trying, any value that you're trying to store into this particular column should be in this format: y hyphen mmm hyphen dd hh colon mm colon ss. And this is an example of that. It's a combination of both your date and the time, and it's going to take 84 bytes. Sorry, 8 bytes. Okay, there is something called timestamp, okay, which is very commonly used date time format. It's again a combination of your date and time, but it also holds something called as in time zone. This is very important. We have several time zones, correct? We have UTC, we have IST, we have PST, we have EST, and it will also hold the time zone. This is very, very important. And by default, if you do not define the time zone, it will be stored in the UTC format by default. Okay, so that's a universal format where you will not be, where if you look at the time difference, it is plus 0.0000. Okay, but if you take IST, then it's going to be plus 5 hours 30 minutes to your UTC. Okay, if you take like that, you have several time zones where based on that you will be adding some hours and minutes. And it's going to take 4 bytes, okay, to represent the timestamp, to represent your date and time along with the time zone. It's going to take 4 bytes. Okay, so I never used date time before because it takes 8 bytes, which is very costly in terms of memory consumption. So I would always prefer to go with timestamp instead of date time. Okay, if you wanted to use date and time separately, you can still use it. but never use the date time. It is going to take 8 bytes of memory.
No
Any
problem.
question? All right. So now let's create a table using these data types and see how to insert the data into that. Okay, so this is how I'm gonna define my table. So if you look at this, I'm gonna create date time underscore table, which is gonna have an ID, the registration date, the last login, and the event time. It should be even date time because it's a timestamp, right? So it should be even date time. All right. Or I can say this as an event timestamp. That's also valid. Okay. So now I'm going to create a table. So my table got successfully created under the batch one database because I did not put a relation operator this time, but I had executed use the database name in my yesterday's session. The session still exists. We didn't discuss about what the session is. We'll talk about that in our upcoming classes. But as I already executed that session was not yet expired. So that's still that use, the database thing is still in use basically. Okay. So I could see a table got created now under this batch one thing, which is the date time table, which is going to have these columns. And if you look at this, it's going to say it's the date, and this is the date time, and this is also the timestamp. Okay. Now let me insert the data into it. So how to insert it? Using the insert into. So this is how I'm going to insert. So insert into the date time underscore table, and these are the columns, and these are my values. Okay. So the ID is going to be 1, and registration date is the date, and what is the format? It's YY MM DD. So YYYY is 2024. Hyphen 03 is my MM, which is month, and DD is 19. Okay, this is for date. Now, when it comes to last login is this is how the last login. This is what I'm trying to insert. So you see, it's 2024-03-18, and then the hours is 10:30:00. And now, interestingly, you could see there is some thing called as a current underscore timestamp. So what will this do is, at the time of inserting the data, whatever the timestamp you have, that means whatever the date time you have. So let's say when I execute this particular statement, my date time is 4/17/2024, and the time is 9:02 a.m. So this is gonna take the system time, and it will insert that into the table for that particular row. Okay. So current underscore timestamp is considered to be a function which doesn't take anything as an input, but returns the date time as an output. So now this date time, which is current underscore timestamp, is going to take my system date time at the point at which this statement gets executed. Okay. So now when I execute this particular statement, okay, what's event? Okay, event timestamp. This should be event timestamp. Okay. So now when I execute this, my statement got successfully executed, and I could clearly see when I do a select statement on the date time table, I could see the value. I could clearly see the timestamp is the current timestamp. Okay. The time at which I executed this statement is on 2024-04-17, and the time is 0903 49 seconds is when I executed this particular statement. So I could clearly see the timestamp column, event underscore timestamp column is populated with this value. Okay, is this clear to everyone? Is this clear to everyone? So this is how you can basically insert the data into the table, which has the columns with their respective data types as either date or a date time or the timestamp. Okay. Any questions from online audiences?